third one down, or you could have a look at the one above, which is a colour called Windy Waters. I would start there. If you're watching us and you're looking at those and you're thinking, you know, you'd like something perhaps a little bit darker, etc., please pop something into the feed and I'd be very happy to offer some more suggestions for you. So I do have another question as well, and this one has come from Christina. Thank you very much, Christina, for joining our session. So you have said, interested, need to update a home in Canberra. I read that greys have had their day and I'd like to know what new colours are going to be in fashion. Well, I'm glad you're asking that question. So we do have, look, I do believe that greys will sort of, you know, hang around, if you like. Grey is very much the colour that is very, very easy to work with. And when I talk about greys, for those that have watched before will know that I categorise grey into 4 categories. So you've got a blue-based grey, which is quite cool. Then you have what's called a red or a purple-based grey. Then there is a brown-based grey, commonly known as greige. And then there is a green-based grey, which is quite neutral. So you can certainly, I do believe that looking at those green-based greys and knowing how adaptable they are and how easy they are to work with, I believe that we will see those around for quite some time. I do think that moving forward, like there's lots of beautiful colours, and I use that word a lot, I know, but that's how I like to talk about colour. Beautiful. Green is still very much on trend, and we will see green staying with us for some time. We are seeing that whites are tending to warm up, and maybe that's because, you know, there's things happening out there, some trends, you know, things like a modern Mediterranean aesthetic that's coming to fruition, and things like, you know, you'll find within that design aesthetic, if you like, you'll find things like travertine being used quite a lot, and because of the tones that exist within travertine being warmer, you'll find that our whites are sort of tending to move across sort of to that side, if you like, as opposed to being cooler. So there's a fantastic white that happens to be one of my favorites at the moment. It's called Aria Ivory, and the reason I love it so much is that I know that with what we're seeing coming into play, you know, coming into trend, and seeing it being moving forward and seeing what's being forecast for the next season and next year, I know that this particular white, I've just got to find where it is now, is going to work extremely well with what's going to evolve. We're also seeing, I'm trying to talk and look at the same time. I should be able to, but I'm not sure whether I can. Okay, we're also seeing, here we go. We're also seeing colours that sit on the edge. So when we talk about, where are we? When we talk about colours like pinks and browns, it's sort of that colour that sits between. So it's not really a pink per se, and it's not really a brown, it's on the edge. Tones like that are really coming to play. Things like your toasted almond sort of tones, clay tones, muted terracotta, very much you'll see happening. So colours like that are sort of colours that I would be recommending to use in your home, and they're fantastic. Okay, here we go. If I open my eyes, I can see it. Okay, it is the second one down. It's called Aria Ivory. It is a beautiful tone, and as I said before, what is the base of the Aria Ivory? Okay, yep, thank you. It is how would I describe it? Like looking at it, and if I put it on screen, it depends on the pixelations in your screen as to what you're going to see at home. But the best way to describe it, it sits within the realms of being a white. It's a warmer white, and it has quite a soft beige, creamy undertone. That's probably the best way to describe it, and it is just beautiful. And I know that if you're looking at things like travertine, terracotta, even like pairing it with things like beautiful, bouclés very much coming into trend, and things like your rattan and your natural finishes and timber, it's going to work extremely well with all of those types of things. So it's certainly a colour to look out for, and I'm happy to pop that into the feed when I finish streaming so that you've all got a link to it if you're wanting to have a look. So I'll just see if there's anything else coming through here. Okay, so I'll continue on. So that sort of answers those questions, but please let me just go back there. Please, Christina, if you do have any more questions in regards to colour, etc., product, whatever it may be, pop something into the feed and I'll be very happy to answer it for you. So I have been travelling a bit this week. I've had the pleasure of going to Sydney, meeting some fantastic people at Kaling Tiles, having a look at some beautiful trending tiles and finishes, etc. And looking at what they have in their showroom, looking at what's trending and listening to the questions and listening to what our viewers, everybody at home that's watching tonight, have been asking about. I thought it's time to revisit kitchen designs and the trends for 2023. Now, I know last week we were asked around colours that were to suit a farmhouse style. So I've broken down, I've created three, you could say, colour selections for three different styles of kitchens that we're regularly asked questions about, because these sessions I like to keep it real and I like to make it informative for everybody that is watching us, and talk about trending designs, etc., trending colours, but talk about the frequently asked questions. So I've decided that we'll revisit some kitchen trends. So let me begin. So, and I've got some notes here to keep myself on track. So I'm going to start with a farmhouse kitchen. So a farmhouse kitchen design draws on country living, as you probably all know, uses a lot of natural elements and rustic accents. Look, it's a warm style that takes comfort or comfortable classics and elevates them in a new way. So look, the fantastic thing about this is both vintage and new on-trend components can be interjected to create a very now feel. So this design sort of originated in France, being the home of the farmhouse kitchen design. And the appeal lies with the warmth and the timeless of this particular design. So colour palettes for this design include things like you've got whites, off-whites, creams, soft grey, brass, black handles. Look, a splash of colour is generally incorporated into the large island bench. And we're seeing things such as dark greys, sage green, or even like dark blue greys. So I have put together a few slides just to show you some of the colours that I'm going to talk about. So what I'm going to do is, with my technology here, I'm going to pop you onto my iPad and hope that it all works, and pop myself up in the corner. Fantastic. We're working. So look, these are just some images that I've taken, just a few snapshots of when you pop a farmhouse style kitchen into your Google search engine, things like this come up. And you can see, look, it's open space with a large island bench. I've already talked about what the colour palette consists of. It's a lot of timber, and look, it really is a timeless aesthetic. So what I've done is I've had a look at some beautiful colours that we have within our colour library, and I've popped them here for you to have a look at. So when you're designing your farmhouse style kitchen and you're looking for colour inspiration, these are some of the colours that I would recommend. And I know that last week we were asked in particular about this kitchen design, and I did mention the Tanura Green, which is the first one there. And then there's some other ones that follow. So you've got your Spruce Grove and Palm Frond, which I think are just beautiful, timeless colours. And especially Palm Frond, it really has that timeless appeal that I know that in years to come, if you were to have perhaps your island bench painted in that, it's going to work a dream. Then I've paired it with a colour called Aspen Snow. Now I do use this colour a lot, and the reason I use this colour a lot is because I know how well it works within environments. So you have heard me talk about whites and the varying sort of whites, being whether you've got a warm white, a cool white, or more of a neutral white. And so Aspen Snow sits in the realms of a neutral white. So it's going to work extremely well in many environments, and it's also going to work extremely well with other colours. So if you're unsure of where to begin, I think this is a great place to start. And then we've also got a beautiful deep blue-based grey, Victorian pewter, which I feel would work extremely well for this sort of kitchen design as well. So there's some wonderful colours there designed to create that farmhouse aesthetic. So the next one I want to talk about is, let me have a look here. I've got lots of things happening, lots of computers. Okay, so I'm going to take you into, and it will be no surprise, into a coastal / Hamptons feel. So look, it seems to be a trend that is really here for the long haul, and the colours are very easy to live with, and to be honest, rather timeless. So a Calcutta marble seems to be the main hero in this space. And you know, you can create or pick up colours from where that vein runs through the marble, so that can be brought to life. Warmer whites, again with that slight sort of green or neutral undertone, work really, really well, and especially with this style marble. You've got a subway tile tends to be something that's favoured in this design, and timber floor, and then there is an injection of blue. So the blue, a traditional Hamptons or coastal, relies on a lot of sort of deep navy is used to help dress the interior, if you like, and you'll find that the kitchens are predominantly a form of white. And then, you know, as you saw previously in the images before, sometimes the island benches have done in a beautiful, soft, oh, thank you, Annette. That's really nice. Sorry, something just come up that said thank you for this live with a love heart. That's really nice. Thank you. And I will come back to you in a moment and answer your question. I'm just going to finish my little piece here so that I keep myself on track. I have a tendency to sort of ramble if I move away from things that I'm trying to talk about, as I'm doing now. So thank you. So yeah, talking about beautiful blue greys for the island bench work extremely well. And then, so, you know, I've put South Pole because this white works really well with the marble. Black flame, I think, fantastic for accessorizing with, or if you're game, having a beautiful white kitchen and then having black flame on the walls could look absolutely striking. Lunar Rock is a beautiful warm grey again, slightly deeper than South Pole, which would work extremely well again. Oyster Bar is that beautiful blue grey, as you can see on the screen there, and that would work for your island bench. I love this colour, and I think that you could particularly use this colour and take it through into your dining room if you were doing perhaps a Hampton style, and saturate your walls with this colour. It would look phenomenal. And then I've also put there in the end a beautiful grey, soft blue grey, almost silvery, called Button Up, which I know would again work for this aesthetic. So I guess it all depends on what you prefer, and that's why I've kept it sort of varied. And you would have heard, if you've watched before, Black Flame happens to be one of my favourite tones for replicating coastal or Hamptons. And I do think what I love about Black Flame, this particular blue, when you look at it, it has a slight, it does have a little bit of red to it, so it tends to almost give off a little, I shouldn't say purple because people are going to go, oh, I don't really want purple in my house, but it just gives off, it's a slight warmth to it because of the red that sits within the tint formulation. And it is a spectacular colour to use. And using that and even pairing that, if you've got a media room, I know lots of people nowadays are building homes, and the new homes, coastal homes, with a theatre room, this is the perfect colour to use in a theatre room with beautiful crisp white trims. And again, you could use that if you're wanting to carry through the colour palette through your home. You could use that colour and inject it into a bedroom. Fantastic colour for that. So I'll quickly go on to the last kitchen sort of design aesthetic that I'm talking about. Now this is contemporary. What I love about what's happening within the kitchen space at this point in time is that people are starting to realise the power of colour, and the fact that injecting your space with colour, because colour has the power to transform your space, but because we all know about the psychology of colour, how you can walk into a space and the colour can make you feel something. And I think that coming out of COVID, we're now starting to appreciate what you can do with your space and what can be achieved with colour and how it can make you feel. So people are now starting, as I said, to really inject colour into their space, and the kitchen is a place where it's being used. And what I really love about the colours that are being used in the kitchen. Are you seeing a lot of green? And we know I've talked a lot about a colour, like a sage style green. That seems to be a trending colour within this space. We're also seeing a deeper, more botanical green come to play. And we're seeing a lot of timber, like you're seeing fluted timber, which I think looks fantastic. And I know that, obviously timber, tones and green sing when they're put together. So here is a colour palette that I've put together looking at what's on trend, looking at the new colours that are coming through from, key players within this kitchen area, if you like. And so I do have some fantastic colours here, and I believe that a really dark, bold kitchen looks stunning. What I do love about when you're using a dark, bold colour is to use a dark grey, a dark black, but it has that brown and green undertone, and I think that it starts to play really well within the environment. So it's not just a flat black, it's got movement within the colour. So I've put on here Tornado. I've put on here Thorny Hold, I think is a fantastic tone, which is the first colour there. It sits within the realms of being a greeny grey, but it does have an element of warmth to it, so it works really, really well. Pair that with some beautiful dark timber or even a lighter oak, and you've got a marriage made in heaven. Now, I've popped the third colour along. You've heard me talking tonight about the colour called Aria Ivory. That is the colour that I've put in here because I think that we're going to see a lot of this colour moving forward, but I know that it helps to achieve that contemporary kitchen aesthetic. Boston Ivy, so a dark, more sort of botanical green is really coming into play. And then I have put in a colour called White Sage, which is reminiscent of sage, which we're seeing predominantly in the kitchen space. So I think that giving you all of those sorts of colour tones gives you somewhere to start. So I'm going to take myself off the screen, put myself back here. We'll get rid of the iPad. I've given you a little lesson in some wonderful colours that work with, your different design aesthetic that you're wanting to achieve. And so now I'm going to answer some questions because I do have quite a few here. So hi Annette, thank you for joining us. So I have a stone home with heavy wooden ceilings and black floor tiles. There is a vivid white on an internal wall ceilings, 15 foot high. What white or hue would you recommend, or what tone in what colour would look sophisticated, as it is a custom architectural home with a tree in the central round living area? Oh my goodness, that just sounds divine. Immediately I'm thinking, we're talking about a heavy wooden ceiling. We're talking about having, a tree in your central round living area. I am thinking about a white, and I've already touched on a couple tonight that have that neutral undertone, that have that slight green, grey, beige undertone. So as I showed earlier on, there's colours like Aspen Snow, South Pole, or you could even, I'm just thinking, because you've got the heavy wooden ceilings, black floor tiles, I guess how much, just so I can picture how much natural light, Annette, do you have coming in to your space? Because that's going to help to determine the intensity of the colour that I would, recommend. Because I'm thinking we could, immediately, as I said before, looking at Aspen Snow, Alpine Snow, South Pole, because all of those colours have that beautiful sort of green, grey, neutral undertone, which I know would just sing with what you have happening there. But just before I give you my final colour recommendation, just let me know about the amount of natural light, and then I'd be happy to give you something. So I look forward to you popping something else into the chat. Okay. So the Aspen Snow over Aria Ivory both work with the green. Which would work better, as I am also using wood and blacks with my green, similar to your palm frond? Okay, so if you're going for a colour similar to palm frond, I'm thinking that Aspen Snow is probably going to be your colour. just because of that undertone, and we want them to sing together and work really, really well. But let me just have a look, because I do have Palm Frond here in front of me. Here we go. Oh, love it. And let me just find Aspen Snow. Can never find it when you want it. Here we go. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to hold these up to the screen. Do understand though that there's a lot of light here, so the colours won't look as true as what they would when you grab yourself a sample pot, and I'll touch on that in a moment. So there is Aspen Snow there, and there is Palm Frond there. So they're the two colours. So I think that that would be the way to go. I will quickly have a look at Aria Ivory and just see whether that is going to work as well. Let's have a look. No, oh, actually, it does work, but here I am sitting here looking, no one can see what I'm looking at home, but that's okay. I'm just having my own little talk to myself. That is Aria Ivory there, and there is your Palm Frond. I think just because the Aspen Snow has more of that slight green undertone, I think that would be the way to go. I hope that helps you. Oh, and yes, I also love Oyster Bar. I used Oyster Bar for a client up here on the Sunshine Coast for the exterior of their home, and it looks sensational. It is a beautiful, beautiful colour. So I'm going to quickly tell you while I just have a look. So thank you, Crystal. Thank you for your question. I'll read it out, and while I'm looking, I'm going to talk about the importance of a sample pot. So Crystal has said, hi, would Aria Ivory work well with paper bark? We are needing to paint our house, but been putting it off for a few years as can't pick a colour. So can I ask you, please, Crystal, are you looking for exterior or are we looking for internal? That's going to help me. Actually, yes, you could use Aria Ivory, and I'll show you. Where are we? Again, you're going to have to just excuse the screen. Okay, so there we go. So there's paper bark and there is Aria Ivory, and they work really, really well together. But what I would suggest is if you're going to use it on an external application, to sample pot first. Now, I'm quickly going to talk about the necessity of a sample pot. So when you stand there deliberating at a colour wall and you're looking at a colour, the first thing I'm going to say to you is get yourself what's called a brilliant white colour chip off the wall, and then put your other colours up against it. Now, the reason I say that is having a white backdrop and then putting your colour in front of it is going to allow you to see the undertone that exists within your colour. What I also recommend is when you're going to go down to, say, Bunnings or your local hardware store, take a piece of white computer paper with you, just a piece of A4, fold it in half, use that as your backdrop. So the whiter the better, so that again you can see the undertone. Now, what the next suggestion is, when you're there, we have what's called palette liners. So all of our paint that comes into the hardware store generally comes in on a palette, and in between each layer of paint are huge big pieces of cardboard. I would recommend going up to the paint counter and asking for a palette liner. And what you're going to want to do is buy a sample pot of the colour that you're thinking about using. Get your piece of cardboard, cut 1 metre by 1 metre square. Brush out 3 coats onto that piece of cardboard. The first coat's going to aid as an undercoat, and then 2 top coats. Once dry, for internal, you're going to place it. So here's your wall, here's your floor. Pop it here next, so it's sitting up against the wall, but touching the floor. Now, the reason I say that is, it's amazing how internal elements can influence your wall colour choice. And the last thing I want you to do is to go out and buy, your 100 litres of internal paint, ready to paint the interior. You start painting and you go, this isn't the colour I thought it would be. Because colour can change in your environment. So it's things like again, here's our wall, here's our floor, here's our piece of cardboard, our sample. Things like having a warm wooden floors can influence your color choice. Having something like a red leather lounge can also influence your wall color. So sometimes of the day it's going to look pink. So it's really important so that when you're trialing it, you can see how it works. The other place, so here's your wall, here's your ceiling. You're putting your sample up here at the top of your wall, touching on your ceiling, and then you're going to look at it at different times of day. So really important to trial it under your artificial lighting, because it is your light that you turn on overnight or late afternoon that can change the color of your wall. So depending on whether you have a warm light, your color temperature of your light could be warm, could be cool, etc. So it can change how your color looks. So by testing it first, that way you're not going to have any surprises when you're putting it out on your walls. And then the same applies when you're looking at external colors. You're using that same piece of cardboard, your sample pot, etc., but you're going to trial your color in full sun, and then also in areas where you lack a lot of natural light. And full sun is really important because when you're starting to use whites externally, and I know how much they are being used, especially where I am in Queensland, every second house is white. You want to ensure that the white is going to be able to handle being out in the elements and in full sun. You want to avoid your white being too glary. So by trialing it or testing via a sample pot, it's basically educating you on how your color is going to perform within its environment. So that is the best tip that I can give you. And it doesn't matter whether you're using whites. It's really important as well for other colors, because as I touched on before, the temperature, the temperature of your lighting, etc., can really change color. So it's super important to trial it. Biggest tip of the day, I say it every single week. I say it when I'm out and about with clients, when I'm in store. You just cannot go wrong if you test your color. So I think that I have a few more questions. Thank you, Therese. I'm glad that you love the tips. Thanks. Actually, I think Anita has come back to me. So what I'll do, Anita, is I'm going to take this offline and I will answer the rest of your questions for you, and same for you, Annette. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining our live colour advice session this evening. It's been fantastic. It's been great to have so many questions. As I said at the earlier, when we first began tonight, next week there is no live colour advice session. I'm going to be in Melbourne at the design show. So if you are in Melbourne, or if you're coming over for the design show, do pop over to our stand and come and say hello. We would love to see you. We can talk all things colour, colorsmith, product, etc. And then do stay tuned on our socials, because we will be bringing you Kyle and Cara. They will be joining us not too far away. So I'm super excited about that. So thank you, everybody. Until I see you again in a couple of weeks, have a fantastic break, and stay safe, everybody. And as I always say, happy painting. Thanks for joining us. Bye.